friends, and welcome back to another video. I'm Emily, and this is my channel where I love to talk about books and all the cozy, wholesome, wonderful books that I love to read. Today I have a particularly fun video because, very excitingly, I was tagged by Jen from Jen's Reading Life. In my head, I get it confused because I'll finish it with like Jen's Reading Room, and because of the alliteration of the R's, but it's Jen's Reading Life. She tagged me to do the April Showers book tag, which I am very excited about. I've never been tagged before to do a tag video, so I was very excited about it when I got through to the end of her April Showers book tag, which I will link down below. You should definitely check it out. And she tagged me, so I've said tag a lot already. It's going to be a great video. I have a good sized stack of books to talk about here, and yeah, let's just go ahead and jump right into the video. The first question is, share a book with water on the cover. And I was kind of going back and forth on this, trying to figure out what I was going to do for it, but I finally decided that I had to do The Harvester by Jean Stratton Porter, which is one of my all-time favorite books. You can't necessarily see particularly well since it's in black and white, but that is all water. And this book is so good. It's about David Langston, who is known throughout the area as the Harvester, and he has this like farm area. He doesn't go out and do a typical job, and so he's kind of looked down upon by some of the farmers in the local area because they're just like, what kind of a man are you that you don't actually work? But he goes through and he harvests different plants and things from the forests and land around him that he's then able to take and like turn into medicine, or send to doctors and pharmacies and stuff in the cities and towns to turn into medicine to help people. And it's a very sweet love story in here as well. The descriptions of nature in here, it's all so beautiful. This particular scene that is depicted here is the key scene right at the very, I think it's the first chapter or the second chapter of the book, where it talks about where the harvester is sitting on his porch with his dog Belle, and he's kind of musing and thinking about life and planning for the year ahead. And every year he sits and he asks his dog whether the dog thinks he should go and try and find a wife, or if they should just continue in their merry bachelorhood as they have. And, you know, of course the dog has no idea what he's talking about, but he barks at the moment when the harvester is asking whether or not he should get a wife. And so then the harvester's like, well, now I have to find a wife, man. And then he has this sort of vision dream of this beautiful woman who comes walking across his lake. I don't remember if the lake has a name, but I can't remember off the top of my head. And it's this beautiful girl, and so he's like, oh, if she's like that, I could be okay with having a wife. And it's just like this, I'm not going to go into detail, but he kind of has this sort of dream of the woman that he would like to marry. And so then he starts building a new house and getting everything ready. He hasn't even found this woman or met her or anything like that. And so he starts building this whole house and redoing everything and getting everything prepared and ready to go and find a wife. And of course, he finds her. There's a whole plethora of details and all of that. The whole book is talking about like that whole adventure of getting a wife, and it is just such a good book. My mom read this aloud to me and my siblings when we were younger, and it's just, I love it. And it's perfect for springtime because there's so many depictions of like nature, and he goes out searching for different plants and things, and I cannot recommend this book highly enough. That's why when it said something, the prompt was a book with water on the cover, I was like, this one. The next question is, what's a classic novel that you would like to curl up on the couch? My goodness, I need to speak. And it's so hard to pick just one for me because I love classic novels, but again, kind of fitting in with these more springtime mood, I picked Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This is a beautiful edition. What is it? The Wordsworth Classics edition. I think that's what it's called, or Wordsworth Collector's Edition. I can't remember exactly, but they are absolutely beautiful. I love them so much. I have the whole set of Jane Austen novels, and then I also got the whole set of Sherlock Holmes novels in these particular editions, and they're gorgeous. And this is one of my top favorite Jane Austen novels. Persuasion's my favorite, but this one's a close second. And it is just so good. Like, if I just want like a cozy, wholesome book to curl up on the couch if it's a rainy afternoon or something, this one's great. And I'm not going to give you a summary. If you haven't heard of Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, highly recommend it. Look it up. Then the third question is, share a scary book you would read during a rainstorm. And I am not a scary book reader. I am not a scary movie watcher or a scary horror thriller. No, not my thing. However, I thought that this was a perfect recommendation for this because it's sort of thriller-esque. It's got a bit of mystery in it, and it's got some twists and turns that, well, I don't know that I would say twists and turns, but there's a particular moment in this book where you're just like, and it is The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. And oh man, I read this I think 2 years ago. So good. Oh my goodness. There's an old movie from maybe in like the 80s or 90s or something. I'm not exactly sure, but it's an older movie. And I watched that one years ago and had just never actually picked up and read the book. But I finally did it a couple years ago and loved it. It's the story of Walter Hartwright, who he goes to be a tutor to two young ladies in the countryside, and while he's there he gets kind of caught up in this whole drama, mystery, thriller. It says on the back that this is considered one of the very first works of detective fiction. Maybe that's part of why I liked it so much. I tried to do, you can look back on my channel, I'm pretty sure, and I tried to do like a book review of this, and it's so hard to talk about it without like spoiling it, but it is so good. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. I picked up this particular edition when I was on a family vacation, and it's not necessarily the easiest to read. The text is very small, and the book overall is just very small, but it was so beautiful that I wanted to get it. And I would love to get another copy that's a little more readable because I would like to reread it. It's just such a good story. But yeah, that would be my response for the third one. And then the fourth prompt is, what is a good book recommendation for rainy days? And this one, how do you narrow it down to one? There are so many good books that are good for rainy days. But what I would say is, in general, a golden age murder mystery. Oh, so good. They're usually pretty simple, easy, quick reads, just lovely. But I wanted to recommend in specific the Detective Roderick Allen series by Niall Marsh. I started reading through it last year and I haven't actually finished it. This is the only one I have, which is like the 26th or 7th book in the series or something. And my plan was to read this in December, but then life around Christmas time is particularly busy, as I'm sure most of you know. And I just never got to it. Just because I just struggle with reading physical books. And the thing that I realized too is that with this type of a paperback where it's an older edition and it's like a little more fragile feeling, I just feel a little bit more delicate about it, where I'm just like, oh, I have to be careful, I don't want to ruin it. So what I think I'm going to do is just try and get this one on from Libby, from the library, or on my Kindle, and then just finish up reading the series, because I only have like 4 or 5 left in the series. I just ate them up last like fall. So so good. Highly recommend this series if you like Golden Age murder mysteries. Roderick Allen is such a phenomenal detective, and one of the books, there's like a love story element to it, and it's just, I love it. I love it so much. So highly recommend it. I almost want to go back to the beginning and start over again and read through it again because it's just so good. Okay, the next prompt number 5, I have them on my phone, so that's why I keep looking down, is what 2 characters would you like to spend a rainy day with? And my response to this is Miss Silver from the Miss Silver Detective series by Patricia Wentworth. Again, if you like Golden Age murder mysteries, highly recommend it. Absolutely love it. I've reread all of the books in the series at least twice. So good. I actually discovered the Miss Silver series because I was watching one of Miranda Mills' videos a couple years ago, and I started with the book The Chinese Shawl, and I just devoured the rest of them. Absolutely love them. And Miss Silver, if you're not familiar with the series, she is a retired governess who ends up taking up sleuthing and being the amateur detective, and she just seems so wise and knowledgeable, and as I am a young mother with a toddler and a soon-to-be baby, I love the idea of getting to kind of like pick her brain about like taking care of kids and just general life stuff. And then also it would be really fascinating to talk about some of her detecting stuff. And then the other character would be Alice Henderson from the Christie book, which is a book by Catherine Marshall. Alice Henderson is a Quaker in that book, and she is like sort of the mentor to Christie. And oh my goodness, I love her as a character so much. She just seems so wise and so knowledgeable, and I feel like I'm in that phase in my life right now where there's so many questions, and you kind of get those moments where you're just like, oh, am I being a good mother? Am I doing this right? Am I being a good housekeeper? Like all those sorts of things. And I feel like sitting down with those 2 ladies, Miss Silver and Alice Henderson, would be just such an enriching experience that you could just sit and like talk over everything, and they could give you all of their life wisdom, and it would be such a good rainy day. The next prompt is share a book that has blue on the cover. I have a surprising amount of books with blue on them, but the one that I ended up picking is Little Men by Louisa May Alcott. People gush and talk about Little Women nonstop all the time. Like, it seems like the majority of people have at least heard of it and are mostly familiar with the story, but people hardly ever mention Little Men, which is the second book in the series. And I love this book so much. It follows Jo March from the first book, which everyone kind of talks about how she's just like this independent, strong, whatever woman. She's going and doing her own thing, blah, blah, blah. In this book, it carries on with her story, and you watch as she's become a mother, and she is a joint teacher with her husband, Professor Bear, and they have started a school for, I think it's just boys. It's like a boys' school because Jo and her husband, they have 2 sons, and they have a bunch of boys. I can't remember now. It's been a long time since I read it. I can't remember now if they're orphan boys or if some of them are orphans and some of them are students from people they know or whatever. I can't remember exactly, but it's a bunch of boys, and it's just so charming to watch how Jo has grown as a woman and how she's embraced this new season of her life and the escapades that the boys get up to. And there's one chapter in particular where I just have such a clear memory of reading it as a little girl, where Jo is watching her older sister Meg had 2 kids in Little Women, and her daughter Daisy is staying with them. And so while she's there, you know, it's a boys' school, so there's like no other girls, and there's not a lot for her to do. The boys are all kind of doing their boy thing, and so what they do is they set up this little like kitchen, like play kitchen thing, but it all works. Like the stove works, and the she can like boil tea, and she's trying to learn how to make like cakes or something. And I just remember being so enthralled as a little girl, just the thought of having like a little kitchen where you have like all the little like pots and pans and the descriptions in that chapter, I was just in love, and I was just like, that's my dream life. I want to have a tiny little kitchen. So that's part of why I like it. It's just, I'm very nostalgic about it, because that one chapter in particular was just, and Daisy's trying to learn how to cook. Like, that's what it is. She's trying to learn how to cook, and so she ends up making some sort of pie or tart or something. And I absolutely love that bit. But the whole book, it is just so good. The character development that you see that Jo has gone through since, you know, sort of her teen days in Little Women, and that she has kind of grown and like who she is as an adult. Oh, I love it so much. So if you have read Little Women and you have not read Little Men, go read it, because it's absolutely charming. Okay, the next prompt is, what book has a rainy setting at some point? I really had to think about this one, because there were a couple of books that I was like, I'm pretty sure there's a rainy setting in this, and then I'm like flipping through the books and I'm like, I don't see any rain in here. So it took me a minute, but I decided on Gone Away Lake by Elizabeth Enright. And this is, I believe it's classified as a middle grade book, and this is a story of Portia and Julian, and they're cousins, and Portia has come to stay with Julian and her aunt and uncle, and I think they both have a little brother. Both Julian and Portia have a little brother, if I remember correctly. But anyway, Portia and Julian are really good friends, and she has come to stay for, I can't remember if it's the whole summer or just a number of weeks during the summer, and they go exploring and do all sorts of things together, and then one day they accidentally stumble upon this little village town area along the edge of a swamp, and then they meet a brother and sister who have been living there for years and years and years. And it used to be a really popular like summer resort spot, and it was on a lake, and then over time the lake kind of dried up and it turned into a swamp, and so they discover like all these old houses. And again, it's a very charming book. I absolutely love it. There is a bit where there's a rainy day, and it's kind of an important part to the story. So it's just really lovely. Like I said, there's these old houses, and then throughout the book, the brother and sister, they're pretty old, because they've been living on the edge of this swamp for ages and ages. And throughout the book, they tell Portia and Julian these different stories from their childhood, and it's just so fun. Like, they get to share that glimpse into a time that used to be with these new young children, and then it's just so good. So good. If you haven't read it, read this one, and then the second book in the series, which is Return to Gone Away. I love both of them. These were very much childhood favorite reads of mine, so I'm really happy that I have this one, because I'm pretty sure this is the same look or edition as the book that I had growing up, so I'm really glad that I was able to find this one. But yes, if you like middle grade book and you haven't read it, middle grade books, and you haven't read Gone Away Lake, highly recommend it. The next prompt, I'm gonna gush, or not gush, I'm gonna rant a little bit about this one. And the next question is, what book would you not mind using as an umbrella? And at first I was like, I don't know. And then I was like, I know the exact book. I know the exact book. If you don't want spoilers for this book, which I will mention in a second, I'm going to have the timestamp here on the screen to skip forward to the next question, next prompt, because I'm going to completely spoil this book. I think it's a horrendous book. I wish that it had never been written. It is so bad. It has the worst ending I have ever read in any book. I'm going to spoil it. So if you don't want to hear it, and you don't want to know what book it is, skip forward. Here we go. The book that I'm going to be talking about is called Me Before You by, I believe it's Jojo Moyes, and a little bit of background to this. At the time of reading this book, I was married to a man who was a paraplegic. He was paralyzed from the waist down, and he was in a wheelchair all the time. So whole life story and stuff of my life that we're not going to get into. This is my ex-husband. I'm not married to him anymore. But at the time I was, at the time of reading this book. And I found out about it because there were trailers that were coming out about the new movie that was going to be released based off of this book. And I had watched some of the trailers and I thought, oh, this is so cute and so wholesome looking. I can kind of relate to some of this. I'm familiar with some of the struggles that disabled people go through. This is going to be great. But before because I was telling my ex that I was like, oh, this would be a fun movie to go and watch together in the theaters. However, before I wanted to do that, I wanted to read the book first, because I'm one of those people that likes to read the book first and then you watch the movie afterwards. I'm so glad that I did, but also just like, why? So if you have no idea what this book is about, it is about a young lady, who goes to be a companion / nurse to a, I believe the correct term is quadriplegic. It's a guy who is paralyzed from his neck down. So he got in in the book, he got in like a bad skiing accident or something. I can't remember for sure. But there's some accident and he is paralyzed. And so she goes to be like an assistant / nurse, whatever, to help him. And she goes to meet him and he's very bitter and very angry, just very, yeah, angry at his life circumstances, because prior to his accident, he was a very active, kind of famous guy that was going around doing all these crazy, wacky adventures and stuff, and skiing and, oh, what's the water version? Because skiing's the snow version. What's the I don't remember. Surfing. That one. Like doing all these crazy things. And so she comes in and she's kind of this quirky, silly sort of a girl. She wears like, I think at one point she wears like yellow rain boots and her outfits are just kind of crazy. And she's just very much herself, which was very charming. So you go through this whole book and it's like so cute and wholesome. I don't remember the exact details, so I can't remember like precisely what happens throughout the book. But you go through this whole thing, it seems like they're falling in love, and it's like she's bringing joy back to his life and showing him that life still has meaning even though he's been through this horrible accident and had such a tough time trying to recover from it and trying to live, suddenly being so disabled. And then you get to the end of the book and you realize that the whole time he has been planning to commit a assisted suicide is what it's called, I believe. He's planning to go to, I don't remember what country it is, but some country where it's legal to do an assisted suicide, and his family had all begged him to hold off for at least a year and wait. And so then he waited for this year, he's met this girl, like, you think it's so cute and wholesome, and you're like, oh, this is great, like she's gonna stop him from committing suicide and show him that life is so worth living even if you have to go through these struggles and challenges. No, that's not what happens. At the end of the book, he still commits this assisted suicide and kills himself. And that's the end of the book. This is the only book that I have literally chucked across the room, and it was a library book, so I'm like very careful about library books. I threw it, and I was just sobbing, and this book should not exist. I would happily destroy it. You know, like the book burning things, which I don't agree with in general. This book should be burnt. Like, get rid of it. Because all I could think was, like, what if some young, like, a teenage girl who's been through a horrible accident and is suddenly disabled is reading this book, and you go through the whole thing and then it's just like, you're not worth living because you're disabled. Like, why? This is a book that I absolutely hate, loathe, and despise, and like I said, would happily use it as an umbrella. I think it has one of the worst endings, and then there's like a whole series of books, like the next one's called like Me After You or something, and needless to say, I have not read the rest of the books in the series because I am just so appalled that this author exists and writes books. Like, if you've read Me Before You and have some different thoughts on it, I'd be very curious to know and to hear about it, but that is the end of my lengthy response to this one. That book I would happily see completely destroyed. Let's move on to a little bit of a happier a happier topic. The next prompt or question is, which character would you like to share an umbrella with? And I thought this was a really cute question. I think it's really fun. So I have two ways that I'm going to answer it. If it's a romantic, you know, you're stuck under it with somebody that you love and admire and blah blah blah, my fictional character would be Captain Wentworth from Persuasion, because he is my favorite Austen hero by far. Absolutely love him. I think he's so amazing. If it was like a romantic thing, Captain Wentworth. If it was like, you know, friend, like best friend, we're stuck here, we're gonna like chit chat and stuff, it would be Polly from An Old-Fashioned Girl by Louisa May Alcott. This describes me. This is my book, An Old-Fashioned Girl. That's me. So it would be Polly. I feel like she would be just such a fun person to be like best friends with, and we could talk about all kinds of things. So that would be who I would be stuck under the umbrella with. And then the final prompt is, share a novel with a dry beginning but an amazing ending. And I agree with Jen on this one. If I'm not captivated by a novel, particularly now, with my reading time kind of reduced as I'm a busy stay-at-home mom and wife and all that, I won't keep reading it. I'll get books from the library and I'll read a chapter or two, and if I'm not feeling it, get rid of it. Like, I won't even bother. But I thought I would kind of recommend a series that is pretty famous and pretty well known, but I don't think that everybody has actually read the books. And that is The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is The Fellowship of the Ring, which is the first one in the series. Most people have heard of this. Most people know about this. A lot of people have seen the movies. The books are definitely slower paced than the movies, because if you accurately depicted the books in the movies, you would have like hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of film to watch. And so they obviously had to shorten it and speed things up and all of that. I think that the original Lord of the Rings trilogy is I have one like minor gripe with it, but for the most part it's a very, very well done depiction of the books, because like I said, you have to shorten them. These books are huge. This is just one book out of the series. So sometimes there's bits where it can be a little bit slow to get through, but oh man, when you get to the end of the series, it's like the final book and there's like a final battle and everything, and it's just like everything wraps up and you've spent so long with this series. It's so good. Like, so good. If you aren't up for reading the actual books, I highly recommend the audiobooks, which I don't normally do. I'm not a huge audiobook person. I'm very, very picky about the audiobooks that I'll listen to. However, I think it was last year or maybe the year before, I listened to the audiobooks narrated by, I believe it's Rob Inglis? I'm not sure. Absolutely loved it. But each of the audiobooks for each of the books is like 20 plus hours long, so it took me a while to get through them, but I really enjoyed that. I have actually physically read the books a couple of times, but listening to the audiobook was so lovely. I would just have it in the car or when I was going for walks or things like that, and it took me so long to get through them because it was like 60 plus hours of audiobook to listen to. So this is what I would recommend for that one. I don't think it's necessarily a dry beginning, but it's like, it's an endeavor. It's a challenge. Like, yeah, it's a lot to get through, especially if you haven't read a lot of older classic books or super long books or something like that, but it is so worth it. 100% worth it. So that is all that I have for this tag. That was the final question. I hope that you enjoyed listening to me talk about this. Typically at the end of these videos you would tag other people. I don't have a ton of booktube people that I have subscriptions to I don't have people to tag. So if you are watching this video and you want to do the April showers tag, I'll put the list of questions in the description box down below. I would absolutely love it if you did it, and if you just leave a comment and let me know that you did. Or if you don't do videos and you just want to answer the questions, you can leave it in a comment down below. I think that would be so fun to read everybody's responses. And honestly, I would love to know, like, what book do you hate so much that you would leave it out in the rain and use it as an umbrella? Like, that could get some really entertaining responses to it, I think. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know if there's any of these books that you've read that you absolutely loved. I hope that maybe you found some more books for your TBR. And that's all. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you soon on the next one. Bye!